Right now, somewhere in a jewelry shop, a person is holding out a diamond ring and getting told no. Not, let me check. Just, no. We don't buy those. That ring cost almost $3,000 a few years ago. Today, the shop won't even give $100 for it. And here's the strange part. The diamond is not fake. It's a real diamond. It's just worth almost nothing now. In the last 5 years, one type of diamond has lost up to 90% of its value. A company older than your great-grandparents just shut down an entire product line because of it. Thousands of workers in 2 different countries have lost their jobs, and almost nobody saw it coming this fast. So what actually happened? And why does most of it trace back to one country? And one huge shift in how young people think about love, money, and marriage. Let's get into it. A diamond built in a warehouse. To understand this crash, you first need to understand what a lab-grown diamond actually is. And no, it is not a fake diamond. It is not cubic zirconia. It is not glass. A lab-grown diamond is made of the exact same stuff as a diamond pulled out of the ground. Pure carbon, arranged in the exact same crystal pattern. If you looked at one under a microscope, even a trained expert would need special equipment to tell it apart from a natural one. Chemically, they are twins. The difference is where they come from. A natural diamond took somewhere between 1 billion and 3 billion years to form deep underground, under insane heat and pressure. A lab-grown diamond takes about 2 to 4 weeks. Scientists either blast carbon with heat and pressure inside a machine, copying what the Earth does naturally, or they grow the diamond layer by layer using a special gas chamber. Either way, weeks later, out comes a diamond. There are 2 main ways scientists grow these diamonds. One method squeezes pure carbon under crushing pressure and blistering heat, basically recreating in a machine what the Earth does naturally over billions of years, just sped up into weeks. The other method grows the diamond one thin layer at a time inside a sealed chamber filled with carbon-rich gas, almost like watching a snowball get built up flake by flake, except every flake is pure diamond. Either way, the result sitting in your hand at the end looks, feels, and sparkles exactly like something pulled from deep underground. Now here is the part that changed everything. Because these diamonds skip a billion years of waiting around underground, they are way cheaper to make. In the early 2020s, a 1-carat lab-grown diamond that looked identical to a natural one could sell for a tenth of the price, sometimes even less. Think about that for a second. Imagine you could buy a brand new car for the price of a used bicycle, and nobody except an expert with special tools could tell the difference. That is basically what happened with diamonds. Young buyers noticed fast. Millennials and Gen Z shoppers, the same generations who grew up caring about where their coffee beans came from and whether their sneakers were made ethically, loved the pitch. No mining, no conflict diamonds, no guilt. Just a shiny stone for a fraction of the cost. Big brands jumped in almost immediately. Pandora, one of the biggest jewelry companies on Earth, dropped natural diamonds completely and switched over to lab-grown stones. And in a move that shocked the entire diamond world, even De Beers, the company that basically invented the modern diamond industry and coined the phrase, "a diamond is forever," launched its own lab-grown brand in 2018 called Lightbox. They priced their diamonds at $800 a carat, a price so low it sent a message to the whole industry. This is happening whether you like it or not. By 2023, lab-grown diamonds made up around 10 to 20% of all diamond jewelry sold worldwide. It felt like the whole industry was flipping upside down almost overnight. But here's the thing about a gold rush. When everybody sees the same opportunity at the same time, something usually breaks. And that is exactly what happened next. Before we get into how bad it got, if stories like this get your brain buzzing, the kind where a normal everyday item hides a giant economic drama underneath, go ahead and hit subscribe. This channel breaks down one hidden money mystery like this every single week, and trust me, this diamond story is one of the wildest ones yet. The machine that never stopped here. Here is where things start to spiral. When word got out that lab-grown diamonds were wildly profitable, everybody wanted in. And unlike natural diamonds, which need a literal mine and years of digging, a lab-grown diamond only needs a machine. You could actually buy your own diamond growing machine online for around $200,000. That is roughly the price of a nice house. And a lot of people did buy them. especially in China. China quickly became the biggest producer of lab-grown diamonds on the planet, making up about half the entire global supply. In one province alone, Henan, factories were cranking out around 1 million carats of lab-grown diamonds every single year. Meanwhile, India's diamond-cutting industry, which has cut and polished diamonds for the world for decades, scaled up hard to keep pace with all the new demand pouring in from both the US and China. For a while, this seemed fine. More factories meant more diamonds, meant more sales, right? Except demand did not keep growing at the same speed as supply. It is like a bakery that keeps hiring more bakers and buying more ovens because bread is selling well, but never checks if people are actually still hungry. Eventually, you end up with way more bread than mouths to eat it. And bread, unlike diamonds, at least goes stale and gets thrown out. Diamonds just sit there, unsold, piling up in warehouses. And pile up they did. By late 2023, the world's stockpile of unsold polished diamonds hit around $20 billion, the highest level in 5 years. So prices did the only thing they could do. They crashed. The numbers here are honestly hard to believe. A 1-carat lab-grown diamond that cost around $3,400 back in January 2020 fell to somewhere between $400 and $1,000 just a few years later. That is a drop of roughly 85 to 90%. At the wholesale level, where jewelers actually buy their stones before marking them up, prices for some lab-grown diamonds fell all the way down to around $80 to $100 a carat. Even De Beers, the company that started the $800 a carat Lightbox brand, could not keep up. They dropped their price to $500 a carat at one point. Then, in May of 2025, they made an announcement that shook the whole industry. They were shutting Lightbox down completely. The company said lab-grown prices had fallen more than 90% since they launched the brand, and you could now buy lab-grown diamonds in supermarkets for around $200 a carat. De Beers basically said, "We are done competing on price. We are going back to selling natural diamonds and letting lab-grown diamonds fend for themselves." And De Beers was not alone. Other lab-grown diamond producers around the world filed for bankruptcy. Factories in India slowed way down, and thousands of cutting and polishing workers lost their jobs as orders dried up. Even in China, where factories had been running at full speed just a year or two earlier, producers began cutting output to avoid selling diamonds for less than it cost to make them. There is one more twist worth knowing here. You would think that once demand for a product finally slows down, the price drops would slow down too. But lab-grown diamonds broke that rule for a while. Even as more and more people bought them, prices kept sliding, quarter after quarter, because factories kept building faster than anyone was buying. It is a bit like a swimming pool, with the hose running full blast while someone forgot to close the drain. More water keeps pouring in, but the pool never actually fills up the way you would expect, because it is leaking out just as fast on the other side. By the start of 2026, the drops finally started to slow, at least a little. Wholesale prices were still falling year over year, but by a smaller amount than the year before, and some of the steepest declines in earlier years, over 40% in a single year at their worst, had cooled down to somewhere closer to 10 to 15%. That does not mean the market recovered. It means the freefall finally found a slightly less brutal pace. So the oversupply alone explains a huge chunk of the crash. But it is only half the story, because even with all those extra diamonds flooding the market, there is still a bigger question. Why did demand not keep up in the first place? To answer that, we have to fly over to the country that started this whole demand story to begin with. Where did all the weddings go? For years, China was one of the biggest and fastest growing diamond markets in the world. In the past 5 years alone, diamond sales in the country roughly tripled to over $22 billion at their peak. But starting around 2021, something changed, and it changed fast. The clearest sign is marriage. In 2013, about 13 million couples got married in China. By 2024, that number had fallen all the way down to around 6.1 million, a drop of more than half in just over a decade. In fact, marriages in 2024 alone dropped by more than 20% compared to the year before, the sharpest single-year fall the country has ever recorded. Why does this matter so much for diamonds? Because in most cultures, and especially in China, Diamonds are tied almost entirely to engagement and weddings. Fewer weddings simply means fewer rings. It is that direct. If a factory makes umbrellas and it stops raining for 10 years straight, you do not need a genius to guess what happens to umbrella sales. But why are fewer people getting married in China in the first place? A few big reasons stack on top of each other. Youth unemployment climbed sharply in recent years. The country's real estate market, which many families had treated like a savings account, went through a serious downturn, wiping out a lot of household wealth. And when people feel uncertain about money, weddings, which are famously expensive in China, often involving a new home and expensive gifts, get delayed or skipped entirely. One survey from China's central bank found that more than 60% of people said they were focused on saving money rather than spending it, with about half describing the job market as difficult or uncertain. So even the people who were still getting married started spending less, and a lot of them turned to something else entirely: gold. In Chinese culture, gold has always carried deep meaning. It represents wealth, luck, and stability, and it has been part of wedding traditions for generations, long before diamonds ever showed up. As the economy felt shakier, gold started to look like the smarter, safer choice again. If you need cash later, most jewelry shops will buy your gold back at a fair price based on its weight and purity. Diamonds, on the other hand, are incredibly hard to resell for anywhere close to what you paid. That difference matters a lot to someone who is nervous about the future. There is also a cultural shift happening that has nothing to do with money at all. On Chinese social media, a slang phrase started spreading that roughly translates to something like a tax on people who are not thinking clearly. It got used constantly to describe spending a lot of money on a natural diamond when a lab-grown version looks exactly the same for a fraction of the price. Basically, an entire generation started openly mocking the idea that a diamond has to be natural to mean something. Some surveys even found that couples negotiating wedding gifts were joking that diamonds under 1 carat were basically worthless, and that a gold ring made more sense anyway. Younger Chinese consumers grew up seeing through the old marketing slogans that convinced their parents' and grandparents' generation that a diamond ring was the only way to prove real love. They started asking sharper questions. Where did this stone actually come from? What does it actually cost to make? Is this really the smartest way to spend money I worked hard for? Gold was not the only winner here either. Platinum, a metal that used to sit quietly in the background of the jewelry world, has been creeping up in popularity too, marketed as an affordable middle ground between flashy gold and pricey diamonds. Surveys of young couples preparing for marriage in China increasingly show a very different set of priorities than a decade ago. Instead of debating carat size, many couples now openly discuss who pays for the apartment, how the wedding costs get split between both families, and whether expensive jewelry is even worth the argument in the first place. The whole idea of a diamond as a required symbol of commitment is being quietly renegotiated, one wedding at a time. Now, you might think lab-grown diamonds should have saved the Chinese diamond market completely, since they solved the price problem. And they did help a little. Younger buyers in China do like lab-grown diamonds more than their parents ever did. But here is the catch. Even a much cheaper diamond does not help much if there are simply fewer weddings to buy one for in the first place. And on top of that, China itself became one of the biggest producers of lab-grown diamonds, which meant its own domestic market got flooded with supply too. So you had two forces slamming into each other at the exact same time. Total demand for diamonds, natural or lab-grown, was shrinking because fewer people were getting married and the economy felt uncertain. And the supply of diamonds, especially lab-grown ones, kept growing because factories kept building. When those two forces meet, there is only one place for prices to go. That collision is where the real damage happened, and the fallout reached much further than anyone expected. The bloodbath. Industry insiders actually started using that exact word, bloodbath, to describe what happened next. And once you see the numbers, it is easy to understand why. Let's start with De Beers, because their story says everything about how bad this got. Their parent company, a massive mining corporation called Anglo American, has taken write-downs on De Beers totaling nearly $7 billion over just 3 years. A write-down basically means the company admitting, on paper, that something they own is now worth way less than they thought. Anglo American posted a net loss of nearly $4 billion in 2025, largely because of this. De Beers itself went from barely breaking even to losing over $500 million in a single year. Rough diamond production dropped by more than 10% as the company scaled back, trying desperately to avoid making the oversupply problem even worse. Anglo American is now actively trying to sell off De Beers entirely, a company it has owned for over a century, and having a hard time finding a buyer willing to take on the risk. Meanwhile, natural diamond prices, the ones dug out of the ground, also took a serious hit. They are not identical twins in this story, but they got dragged down by the chaos too. Prices for 1-carat natural diamonds fell more than 10% in a single year, hitting their lowest point this century, according to major industry price trackers. Some analysts pointed out that a diamond ring today is sometimes worth less than the plain gold band sitting right next to it. Think about how strange that is. For 100 years, the gold band was the boring, cheap part of the ring. Now it might be the part actually holding its value. The pain spread across entire countries. In India, where a massive share of the world's diamonds get cut and polished by hand, exports collapsed. At one point, imports of polished diamonds into the United States, one of India's biggest customers, dropped by more than 80% in a single stretch. Thousands of skilled workers who had spent years learning precision diamond cutting suddenly found themselves without orders to fill. In Botswana, an African nation whose entire economy leans heavily on diamond mining and its partnership with De Beers, the government has had to start rethinking its whole economic strategy, looking for ways to depend less on an industry that suddenly looks a lot less stable than it did a decade ago. Back in China, the same factories that were running around the clock just a couple years earlier started pulling back too. Producers who once rushed to buy those $200,000 diamond-growing machines found themselves sitting on mountains of stones nobody wanted to buy at the old price. Some slowed production on purpose, choosing to make fewer diamonds rather than keep selling at a loss. Others simply could not keep the lights on. It is a strange kind of failure, not because the product did not work, but because it worked too well, and too many people built the exact same machine at the exact same time. And then there is the detail that probably hits closest to home for regular people. If you personally own a lab-grown diamond and try to sell it or trade it in, many jewelry shops will simply refuse to take it. Not because it is fake, because they are worried prices will keep falling even further, and they will get stuck holding something that loses value the longer they own it. Imagine buying a car, driving it home, and finding out the dealership down the street will not even consider buying it back, not because it is broken, but because they are scared of what it might be worth next month. That is the bloodbath, bankruptcies, mass layoffs, billion-dollar write-downs, a 137-year-old company trying to sell off a business it built its entire identity around, all of it traced back to a mix of too many factories and too few weddings. So where does that leave things now? Is this crash still happening, or has the dust started to settle? Here's where it gets interesting. Forever isn't what it used to be. By early 2026, something unexpected started showing up in the data. The freefall began to slow down. Wholesale lab-grown diamond prices are still falling year over year, but the size of the drops has been shrinking every quarter. Some price trackers reported the smallest quarterly decline in years. It is a bit like a ball bouncing down a staircase. It is still falling, but each bounce is smaller than the last, because it is getting closer to the bottom step. Many analysts now believe lab-grown diamonds are approaching something close to a price floor, the point where it barely costs anything less to make them, so there is not much room left to fall. Interestingly, demand for lab-grown diamonds has not disappeared at all. In fact, unit sales, meaning the actual number of pieces sold, have kept climbing steadily. People did not stop wanting diamonds. They just stopped being willing to pay old prices for them. Even regulators have started catching up to this new reality. In the United States, regulators updated their official rules in 2025 and removed the word synthetic from the accepted list of terms for lab-grown diamonds. a small but symbolic sign that these stones are now being treated as real diamonds rather than knockoffs. There is a new idea taking hold across the industry, and it might explain where things go from here. Instead of treating lab-grown diamonds like a rare investment, the way natural diamonds were marketed for generations, more people in the industry now see them as something closer to a piece of clothing or a phone case. Something you buy because you like how it looks, not because you expect it to hold its value forever. Under that mindset, the low price is not really a failure. It is simply what the product is supposed to be. Natural diamonds, meanwhile, are trying to lean hard into scarcity and heritage, the exact story De Beers built its empire on almost a century ago, betting that people will still pay a premium for something rare and dug from the earth rather than grown in a lab in a matter of weeks. It is a bit of a gamble in the other direction now. For decades, the natural diamond industry did not have to work very hard to convince people diamonds were special, because there was no cheaper twin sitting right next to them on the shelf. Now that the twin exists and looks identical, the entire pitch for natural diamonds has to shift from "this is beautiful" to "this is rare," and rare is worth paying for. Whether that argument works on a generation raised to question price tags is still an open question. Not everyone in the industry agrees on how the story ends either. Some analysts believe the worst is fully behind lab-grown diamonds, pointing to slowing price drops and steady demand as proof the category has found its footing. Others think there is still room to fall, especially for larger stones, since bigger lab-grown diamonds have kept dropping in price faster than smaller ones. Even within the same industry, experts are split on whether this is a market hitting bottom or a market still catching its breath before the next leg down. And back in China, the question everyone in the industry is really asking is simple. Will marriage rates ever bounce back? Will young couples return to spending big on rings once the economy feels more stable? Or has something shifted for good, where gold, platinum, or nothing at all becomes the new normal for a wedding gift? Nobody knows for sure yet. But one thing this whole story proves is that even something marketed for 100 years as eternal, unbreakable, and forever can still be reshaped by a few years of changing minds, changing machines, and changing culture. Forever, it turns out, was never really about the diamond. It was about what people believed the diamond meant. And once enough people stopped believing it, the price followed right behind. If you made it this far, thank you for sticking with this one, because there was a lot to unpack. Hit like if you learned something new, and subscribe with notifications turned on so you do not miss the next deep dive into a hidden money story like this one. Before you go, here's a question for the comments. If you were buying an engagement ring today, would you go with a lab-grown diamond, a natural one, or skip the diamond completely and go for gold, like a lot of young couples in China are doing now? Let me know down below.